Hello everyone, good afternoon. UPSC mains is over, and I must say that the student of political science and international relations, have cherished the, opinion and decision that they have taken PSIR as an optional paper in UPSC. They have actually done very well, right? If you look at the question paper was very good, very comfortable, right? And I hope those who have prepared it seriously attempted a question, all questions, and they have performed well. Let me see here the questions. This is Dr. Bijendra. I teach political science and international relations optional paper at PLUTUS IAS, and I must say that the all of question, not even a single one, was from my class notes. Let's see what kind of question was asked in this time, right? You can see here that there are 8 questions. 1 and 5th question are compulsory. So look at the first question. You see within first there are subset of question, like within first question there are 5 questions, A, B, C, D, E. So look at the question, system approach, right? Then second is cultural relativism, third is revolution in permanence, fourth is basis of power, and fifth is, Locke social contract. Now look at the second question, and then we will move to for the, how one should have and one should approach to the paper. Second question, if you look at factors like community, culture, nations weaken the hegemony of neoliberalism. Today discuss. This is, then again the 2B was equality of state caused equality of power, and equality of power is liberty. Comment. Question number 2C, elitist theory of democracy denies the possibility of democracy as rule of the people. Elucidate. Now the third question, right? Here you have 3 questions, 3A, 3B, 3C. Third A was examine the liberal theory of state in contemporary politics. Now third B was human rights are complex and contested social practice that organizes relations between individuals, society and the state. Comment. Look at the third C question. Individualism is the inherent in Hobbesian absolutist ideology. Comment. Now the fourth question, you can see the fourth question was 4A, 4B, 4C, that Dr. Ambedkar's idea of social justice leads to egalitarian justice as compared to Rawls' justice as fairness, which aims at the notion of pure procedural justice. Comment. Right. Now come to the 4B. The panchayats with Gram Sabha should be so organized as to identify the resources locally available for the development in agriculture and industrial sector. Examine statement in the context of Gram Swaraj. Now question number 4C, examine the entitlement theory of justice. Now first question is mandatory from the part 1, right? And then you can attempt maximum 3 questions or minimum 1 question, right? That. Now come to the part B. Let's see the 5th question. It has 5 subsets of question. Look at the first 5A. Analyze the workers' movement in India in pre-independence period. Second question, the preamble of Indian Constitution reflects itself as a social contract. Elucidate. Now question number C is Legislative Council is a house without any effective power. Comment. Right. Question number D, how far is the National Commission for Backward Classes as empowered body? Assess its role in the context of raising demand for backwardness among dominant communities. E. High concentration of economic activities and consumption pattern in post-liberalization period has led to failure of environmental movement in India. This is mandatory, right? Everyone has to attempt this question. Now you have three more questions. Look at the question, then I'll come to analyze the answer. How one should analyze answer, right? How to approach to the question. So 6th A, you can see electoral behavior of voters is governed more by social and economic factors than the political factors, right? Now come to the 6B, which talks about the doctrine of basic structure of the constitution has enhanced the power review of Supreme Court. Examine. C. Discuss the composition and functions of interstate council. Extent has this body been successful in achieving its objective. Now look at the C. It is about 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Do you think that amendment would contribute in achieving the goal of empowerment of marginalized section of society? Now 7B, the speaker represents freedom and dignity of the house. Examine. C. Discuss the policy initiative of 14th Finance Commission aimed towards promoting and strengthening agricultural development in India. Now 8th question was like this. Ethnicity is the underlying cause which poses a great challenge in resolution of problem in northeast region of India. Now 8th B, the making of Indian Constitution is described as the attempt towards social revolution. Comment. Now C, right, 8C, how far is the correct that regional parties have strengthened democracy and federal system? Substantiate answer with your suitable example. Now question was very easy, right, this time, and whatever I have taught in the classroom, all questions are directly from in the paper. Let me see, how should approach to the question. First question is about, everyone has to attempt first question number first, and question number 5. That is mandatory. So question number 1 and question number 5 is mandatory, and question number 1 has also 5 subset question, and question number 5 has also 5 questions, right? Question A, B, C, D, E, right? Now here again you have question number 1A, 1B, 1C, question number 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D and 5E, which are compulsory to attempt. Question number 1 and question number 5 are compulsory to attempt. Apart from this, one has to attempt 3 more questions, right? And at least one question one has to attempt from either of the side, right? So you have 6 more questions, right? So one should attempt 3 from that side, 2 from that side and 1 from that side, or 2 from part B and 1 from this side, right? So total you have to attempt 5 questions. This is mandatory. 2 questions, 3 more questions one has to attempt, 2 either from section A, 1 from section B, or 2 from section B and 1 from section A. Now let me see paper 1 section A. What is the 1A? 1A, right? It is about system approach, right? This is a directly question, right? So one should introduce that, okay, David Easton has given system approach to understand the comparative politics, right? And he explained how this approach can help the political scientist and any person to understand the contemporary political institutions. And he created one term called system. He used the word system instead of state, right? and he was a pioneer of behavioral movement, right? Then one should discuss about the salient feature of system approach. For example, one should talk about inputs, right? For example, inputs are demands and supports, and then one to talk about output, right? What are the outputs, right? And then one should explain what are the limitations of and criticism against this approach, and then one should conclude it with a special reference with some example. For example, Rajani Kothari, in his book Politics in India, used the system approach, right? Later on, he actually abolished that approach. Anyway, so conclude this system approach with some certain example, like Rajani Kothari's Politics in India. So that should be the approach to tackle this question. 150 words, that is enough, right? Now look at the second question. What was the question? Question was cultural relativism. Basically this question is more fall in anthropology or sociology, but here also it falls under rights. If you look at the liberals talks about uniform set of idea like rights, equality, justice, right? So they favors a very uniform or universalized idea of any concept. For example, right, justice. Now if you look at the cultural multiculturalist, who talks about no, there should be some cultural rights that should be preserved, for minority, for linguistic groups, for religious minority, etc. Here one should define what is cultural relativism, which is just opposite of the idea of liberals. Liberals wants to universalize the idea, but cultural relativist wants to talk about the culture, which is very important. Now if you see, one can make distinction between radical culturalist or a strong culturalist and weak culturalist. There is a two kind of culturalist, a strong culturalist and weak culturalist, right? A strong culturalist, or you can say radical culturalist. Now radical culturalists believe that culture should define the concept of even what is meaning of, what is notion of rights, what is notion of just and unjust, what should be the concept of equality, and so on and so forth. Now if we think about the strong radical theory that culture should define the all concept, that in that way this may turn into a totalitarian. For example, one can give example of Iran. What is happening in Iran, right? They are strong culturalists, radical culturalists, and they even define women freedom under the ambit of culture, and which is a male patriarchal basically. Now weak culturalists defined all set of idea with flexible term. For example, communitarian. What communitarian, like Michael Walzer and Michael Sandel, talks about that except right to life and personal liberty, every idea differ from community to community. Fine. Right to life and personal liberty should be intact to the individual. Rest, for example, the concept of human right, the concept of rights, the concept of equality, the concept of justice, it differ from the community to community, right? So weak culturalist is similar with the idea of communitarian. Now if you look at the weak culturalist, also falls under the some like pluralist theorists, like for example Isaiah Berlin, who talks about pluralism. for example, Will Kimlicka or Bhikkhu Parekh or Joseph Raj, who talks about diversity and plural value in liberal society, right, which is needs to be promoted and protected for minority rights. Fine. Or for example, individual right, one can critique it through the lens of feminism. Feminism is, strong critique of cultural right, because all culture subordinates women. All culture subordinates women. So that would be the approach to attempt this question. Let me move to the next question, right? Revolution in permanence. Now, the concept of revolution is, given by Aristotle, right? But later on, if you look at the 19th century, mid of 19th century, Karl Marx theorized the idea of revolution, right? And if you look at the Karl Marx, he said, that revolution is one means to achieve socialism, right? But his idea was revised by Edward Bernstein, right? And he said that socialism can be achieved through parliamentary road to socialism. That leads to, that leads to reaction in orthodox Marxists like Karl Kautsky, who criticized Edward Bernstein for revising Marx's idea. Now, one can bring Leon Trotsky, who gave idea of permanent revolution, right? And or Lenin, who gave idea of permanent revolution through the vanguard system, right? One party system, right? Or democratic centralism, right? So one can analyze Leon Trotsky and Lenin, and then one can bring idea of Mao, idea of revolution, and his understanding of permanent revolution, right? And then one should criticize this idea of revolution and permanence by the lens of Karl Popper, right, who criticized the idea of communism, right, that revolution, and Hannah Arendt, that how a communist used ideology as a tools to establish a totalitarian state. So one should attempt like this, right? Let's move to the next question. Yeah, the basis of power. One can start with, what is the notion, what is the concept of power in easy language, and then, what are the factors that contribute in gaining, acquiring power, right? For example, social honor, economic strength, physical might, technical prowess, religious piousness, right? Legal authority, right? Knowledge. These are the all source of acquiring power in society. And just you have to link with the Max Weber's social analysis of authority and power, that he talks about charismatic authority, traditional authority and rational legal authority. And then just, one need to talk about the French philosopher B.H. Raven and, John R.P. French. He talked about 6 bases of, power, which is informational, which is persuasion. Persuasion is also form of power. Then reward is also form of power. Then coercion is also form of power. Legitimate is also form of power. Expertise, right, is also form of power. And trust is also one form of power. So there are many philosophers who talks about basis of power, right? Max Weber, Raven and French, right? Michael Mann also talks about, social, economic, political, military basis of power. Michael Mann, right? So there are many philosophers who talks about different bases of power. Fine. And then one should conclude it with, bringing diverse understanding of power. For example, one can bring here Stephen Lukes, who gave, 3 dimensions of power, right? And he said, power is essentially a contested concept, right? And then close the answer. Fine, right? Now, let's move to the next question. What was the question? And here the question was, the question was Lockean social contract. It was the easiest question, Lockean social contract. how one should attempt it? One should attempt with defining Locke. Locke is the father of liberalism, and who actually criticized divine right theory and Filmer's idea, right? And he proposed a social contract, right, and natural theory of rights, right? And he said, that in the state of nature, everyone is rational, man is cooperative, everyone is free, right, and everyone has right to, life, liberty and property. Everyone has a right to govern themselves, right? But if you look at the state of nature, there are some problem. What are those problem? Problem is how one can legislate when how one can be impartial in case of their own case, or in case of any person who is the enemy to that person. So there is a problem. There is a problem in to become impartial in lawmaking, in law application and law adjudication, and therefore he proposed a social contract, right? So one should define why people need to enter in social contract, and then define what are the powers that is every individual confer to the state. For example, power to make law, power to execute law, and power to make law, power to implement law, and power to execute law. This law, and he made a very, very limited government, right? So his idea of social contract provided two, one is society and other is civil authority. So he provided two social contract, one establishes society and other contract establishes civil government, right? And government is a trustee of the governed, right? Government should govern only in the interest of the governed, unless the government has all right to replace the government, right? Now you can explain that how John Locke idea is, John Locke idea of social contract is relevant in today. It answers why one should obey the authority. One should obey the authority because there was a social contract, right? And we have given a right to govern to the government, right? Rest of rights lies with the individual. And one can make C.B. Macpherson's critique, how C.B. Macpherson accuses John Rawls that he is a philosopher of bourgeoisie, right, and capitalist economy system, right? One say also can criticize through the communitarian lens, right, how John Locke universal idea cannot be possible, right? Because we cannot universalize the concept of rights or concept of equality, even the concept of freedom, right? It depends on community to community, right? So that is a very easy question. Now let me move to the next question, right? Second A. Now look at this question. This question is factors like community, culture and nation weaken the hegemony of neoliberalism today. Now factors like community, factors like culture, factors like nation weaken the hegemony of neoliberalism today. Discuss. Now one should explain what is a neoliberalism, right? For example, neoliberalism is an updated version of liberalism, right? Classical liberalism, who had focused focused on absolute property right and free market capitalism, right? Who considers individual as a self-autonomous agent, right, and man as a rational being or economic rational being, right, who can think best of himself or herself, right? And then if you look at the new liberals idea that has been challenged by the communitarian, so one can offer communitarian critique to liberalism. For example, one can bring Wilhelm one can bring Isaiah Berlin, one can bring, Joseph Raj, Bhikkhu Parekh to analyze the idea of neoliberalism. And one can also discuss communitarian idea, right? Communitarian idea, right? To talk about individual, society and culture, right? One can bring cultural idea of cultural nationalism, right? How the revival of new far right around the globe. If you look at Iran, if you look at France, where the right party secured more vote. If you look at Italy, right, recently, if you look at the Britain, right. So here, if you look at the community, culture, nation, which are more focused, and that is challenging to the new liberal idea of cooperation and coordination at international level, right? You can cite the example how Britain has made exit from the EU, right? And how far right, in throughout the world, growing, and that has made the challenge on neoliberalism, right? So one example, many example one can put, and many argument one can put against the new liberal idea, which are under challenge, due to the revival of communitarian culture and far right along the globe, right? So here I'll stop here. One can give example of India, the rise of Trump in US, rise of far right in Sudan, rise of far right in here kahan pe, yes, in France, right? So there is a worldwide rise of far right, and that is challenging the new liberal ideas. Fine. So that is the one can just pick up the question, right, with theory and practice both. Now come to here, talk about equality of state. Yeah, the equality of property caused equality of power, and equality of power is liberty. Now here one should introduce what is the relationship between equality and liberty. Introduce with the relationship between equality and liberty, and a special reference to Tocqueville and Jasmel, right? And then one should bring socialist idea, for example, of social equality. For example, one can bring Karl Marx, which talks about equality of property, right? Right. And which talks about equality of property, economic equality among the people in society. Then one should explain that how Marx criticized the unbridled capitalism, unbridled freedom in capitalism had promoted inequality between workers and bourgeoisie, right? And resulted in alienation, right, exploitation, right? So Karl Marx gave idea of equality of estate, but at the same time, if you look at the class, liberals or new liberals like Hayek, like Milton Friedman, like Robert Nozick, they criticized equality of state, right? And what are the threat of equality of estate? Fine. And then new liberals focused on liberty as a major pillar of individual freedom or open society, right? And then one should conclude with that positive liberals, which talks about that equality and liberty both can coexist, right? Equality of power is equality of power is liberty. Equality of power is liberty, right? So one can bring positive liberals who thinks that liberalism and equality and liberty are complementary to each other, right? And both can coexist, right? So one can, the nation state can promote liberty, at the same time they can address the social economic inequality, and for example, one can bring Rawls, one can bring T.H. Green, right? One can bring Lasky, right? Anyone, many philosophers one can bring, and they can talk about the equality of power is liberty, right? So very analytical question, it was a question was very good. Now let me talk about elitist theory of democracy denies the possibility of democracy as a rule of the people elucidate. Now one should introduce what is the elitist theory of democracy, right? Bring Mosca, right, who talks about there are only two classes, ruler and ruled, right? And Pareto, who talked about circulation of elite, right? And then one can bring Robert Dahl, who talks about procedural democracy and idea of representative democracy. But then one can bring about C. Wright Mill, who studied American democracy and talked about that American democracy is essentially elitist, right? And there are three groups, right? Military, politician, and corporate, rules the country, right? And one can bring also Robert Michels, who talks about iron law of oligarchy, right? To substantiate the idea. And then one can talk about that this elitist theory of liberty is antidote or antithesis to democracy itself, which talks about the democracy is rule of the people, demos and krasia, right? So rule of the people. And there are many philosophers, for example, C.B. Macpherson, right? John Locke, right? There are participatory democratic theorists like Carol Patman. Then deliberative democratic theorists like Salah Behnebab, right? Jürgen Habermas talked about the component of democracy, right? Democracy does not mean elite. Democracy means something else, right? Rule of the people, their participation, their deliberation. So many things could be assembled here and to create a good answer. And in conclusion, one can reject or you can accept along with your persuasion, right? That whether elitist theory denies the possibility of democracy as the rule of the people or not, right? With the suitable example. Fine. So this is the question. Now come to the question number 3rd. Now the question is, examine the liberal theory of state in contemporary politics. So liberal theory of state, here one should move to the classical liberals, like what John Locke, for example, John Locke talks about the limited theory of limited government or limited state. Then one can talk about laissez-faire state, by Adam Smith, right? So what classical liberals talks about the state, right, and nature, its basic element. Then what modern liberals talks about state, right? So, and then third, what new liberals talks about state, and what are the critique, right? What are the critique? So for example, Marx was a staunch critique of liberal theory of state. For example, feminist, right? Feminist is very critique. Feminist has its own criticism against liberal theory of state. So one can write about liberal theory of state, in 3 parts, like classical liberal theory of state, what classical liberals like John Locke, Adam Smith, Herbert Spencer, Thomas Paine thinks about, state, right? Right. So for example, classical liberal talks about state, a representative democracy and limited government, right? Then one talks about modern liberals who argue that state should play a positive role in order to provide a condition, right, a good condition to ameliorate, for the betterment of the people, right, especially the vulnerable people. So a state should provide, social security, a state should provide education, health, etc., right, then one should come to the neoliberal, and then one should start criticizing with Marx and feminist and also communitarian, and then conclude the entire answer, right. It would be 20 marker, you have to write in 300 words approximately, 4 sites you have to write. So that should be the approach. Fine. Now let me talk about 3B. Now come to here. Human rights are complex and contested social practice that organize relations between individual, society and the state. Now if one should start with the concept of human rights, right. For example, human right is a set of rights declared by the United Nations General Assembly on 10th December 1948, through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, and it has preamble and 30 articles, right. And then one should talk about what are the basic features of that preamble and 30 articles. For example, preamble talks about equal dignity of man, right, equal dignity of all, right, freedom, justice, equality, right. And then one should come with how this UDHR is a universal idea, right, and that everyone wants to, or especially liberals wants to uniformly apply it everywhere. Now if you look at explain the objection of multi-communitarians or cultural relativists. So if you look at the cultural relativists, they talked about human right. Of course human right is fine, but it is a very complex. You cannot define human right universally, right. Human rights in Congo cannot be compared with the human rights in India, and the human rights in India cannot be compared in the human rights of US. So one can make this other object made by the culturalist, right, then communitarians, and one can outline the understanding of liberal, right, communitarian and feminist understanding of human rights. For example, cultural relativist or the communitarian, right, or the multiculturalist wants human rights should be defined in a particular context, in particular society, right. For example, today the S. Jaishankar had conversation with the US counterpart, and he talked about that democracy and human right is a a concept which which differs from society to society. Anyway, so one should bring many philosophers and to define it, and one said that it is a very contested social practice, right, and it is a relation between individual, society and the state, right. If you look at human right, there are multiple declaration done by the United Nations. For example, UN Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People, UN Declaration of Rights for differently able people, UN Declaration of Rights for Refugee, etc. and etc. So one should comment it, gossip on this human right, different perspective of human rights, and then now let's see the Hobbes. Individualism is inherent in Hobbes' absolutist ideology. Now if you look at in Hobbes' idealist ideology, where you have to find individualism. Now you have to start introducing Hobbes. So introduce Hobbes first, and then define his his idea. For example, starts with social contract, right? Social contract, and where he talks about that its state of nature is a very competitive, right, where each man is enemy to each man, right, and each individual is at war with each individual, right. It is a competition, but everyone has endeavor or everyone has a reason to go for the social contract, because in the state of nature life is in danger, right. Life is in danger and there is no security, and no one wants to face a violent death, right. So, but everyone has to go to the social contract to protect his right to life. Now everyone will go to the social contract, where each individual will contract with each individual and form a covenant, right, form a covenant, and through covenant a civil form of government will be formed. That civil government would be absolute, right, undivided, right, inalienable, right, sovereign power, right. This civil government is sovereign power, right. Their power would be absolute, undivided, inalienable, unlimited. Now if you look at this absolutism, where even each individual enjoy right to life. Each individual enjoy right to life, right, and rest of the rights he had transferred to the civil government, right. So even Hobbes established absolutist government, absolute idea, right, a totalitarian government, but even each individual has right to life, and if right to life is under threat, then each individual has right to revolt, right, right to revolt. So one can treat this question like this. Now come to the fourth A. This is 20-mark question. Now question was very it was directly from my notes. While I every time while I teach roles, I discuss Ambedkar's idea of social justice. Wherever I teach roles, I talked about the various idea of Indian Constitution, like Article 15, Clause 3, Clause 4, Clause 5, and Article 17. Now look at the Ambedkar's idea of social justice, right, leads to egalitarian justice as compared to the roles justice or as fairness, which aims to the notion of pure procedural comment. Now first one should introduce the concept of justice. The concept of justice, right. Now then one should come to the Ambedkar, or one can start roles. That depends on that, no problem. You have to compare the Ambedkar idea of social justice, right, where he talks about that that individual should be the unit of political life, not the collective. Individual should be the unit of life, not the collective, not the caste, right. Secondly, he talked about liberty, equality and fraternity. Liberty and equality and fraternity. Fraternity should be the goal of to achieve for any democratic state, right. And then he said political democracy is not sufficient, right. Political democracy is not sufficient. We must achieve social democracy. Social democracy means there should be inclusion of all class, right, in other sphere of life, for example economy, for example public sphere, for example institution. Now one can bring roles. Rawls also give idea of social justice, mind it. Rawls also give idea of social justice, and the core argument of Rawls how we can establish idea of social justice. We can establish idea of social justice through a scheme of distribution, right? And he said that all primary resources should be distributed equally unless an unequal distribution should go to the least well off, right? And he provided three principle, right? First principle is liberty principle, right? Liberty principle. And he said that every person has equal liberty, right, to the most extensive system, right, and compatible with similar liberty to all. So he is providing equal liberty, right? And secondly he said economic and social inequalities should be addressed in such a manner that the least well off should be the more advantaged, should be more benefited. And secondly, office and position should be open to all under fair equality and fair opportunity. Now see, he said one must apply rule A first, then B, and then B, right? Now this he proposed some procedural, right? You have to follow the process. You cannot apply B first and then come to A. No, you have to follow the process. You have to apply A first, then second has two principle, second A, then second B, right? And then how you can get the justice. But Ambedkar idea of social justice was not procedural, but it was substantive. Ambedkar idea of justice was substantive one rather than procedural one, right? And one can criticize, compare it. Now over. Now let me talk about the next question, that the panchayat with Gram Sabha should be so organized as to identify the resource locally available for the development in agriculture and industrial sector. Examine the statement in the context of Gram Sabha. Now how one should approach? One should start with 73rd Amendment, 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. 73rd Amendment Constitutional Amendment Act, which provided a uniform structure of Panchayati Raj institution. And what was the structure? The Gram Panchayat, second Panchayat Samiti, and third, Jila Parishad, right? This 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, recognized Gram Sabha as a nodal agency of deliberation at local level. Gram Sabha is like a parliament at the center or the state legislature in the state. So Gram Sabha should be there, and every adult person of the village is a member of the Gram Sabha. That is recognized by the 73rd Amendment Act. Now if you look at the 73rd Amendment Act, also gave a recognized 11th schedule, which included 29 subjects, right? And that includes agriculture and industrial, small scale industry, for example the handicraft. Now if you examine the statement, right, if you look at if the Gram Sabha, right, or the Panchayati Raj should be promoted, right, in such a way that they can use the local resources, right, to use the resources for development of agriculture and small scale industry, for example fisheries, right, for example dairy product, for example small handicraft, yeah, right. So there are for example called industrial cluster that could be promoted in villages, and that should be based on the Panchayati Raj, under the Panchayati Raj. And Gram Sabha should be a deliberative body, right, to frame the law, right, in order to promote it. Now if you look at in 2014 there is a one report prepared by Manisankar Iyer, right. He was a Panchayati Raj minister in UPA-1, which talked about that how Gram Sabha can play an important role, right, in ensuring development of agriculture and industrial, right. So in this way one can attempt, right, the question, but at the same time one can put criticism that if you look at the Panchayati Raj, which are facing many challenges, right. What are those challenges? Challenges are coming from bureaucracy. Challenges is coming from a member of Legislative Assembly and MP. For example, one can cite the MP lad, Member of Parliament, local development local area development budget, right. So if MP lad and MLA lad has been given to the MP and MLA, then what is the significance of Panchayati Raj, right, for the local development? So there should be way forward that how one government can promote Gram Sabha, right, to become a autonomous self government at the grassroots level, right. If you look at the Panchayati Raj, there are 29 lakh elected representatives working in India, which is a silent revolution, right. What Peter Ronald D'Souza called a silent revolution in India, right. So that one need to examine the statement. Fine. Now come to the next question. Here, yeah, this is a question. Examine the entitlement theory of justice. It's a very easy question. Everyone knows Robert Nozick has given the theory, right. Now one should introduce Robert Nozick. One should introduce Robert Nozick first, that he is a political philosopher. He is a great political philosopher of 20th century who supported absolute property right. He had given theory of self ownership and minimal estate, right, and he criticized Rawlsian theory of justice, right, and accused Rawls that Rawlsian theory of justice is a pattern theory of justice, pattern, right, or and state theory of justice, right, or procedural justice, right. And he said he had given an independent theory of justice, which is entitlement, entitlement theory of justice. What are the basic feature of entitlement theory of justice, right? That just acquisition, principle of just acquisition, principle of just acquisition. It means if someone has acquired the property through the just mean at initial stage, he has entitlement, right? He has a right over that property. It means if someone's holding or someone's property is acquired justly, then he has right over that, and no one has a right to take it away, right? It cannot be theft, it cannot be taken away on the name of progressive taxation, right? So now second, he had given principle of just transfer, right? So if someone has transferred, voluntarily transferred some amount of property to someone, then someone, he has or she has right to property over that, right? And third, see, he said no transaction except A and B are the just transition. There are only two transition is just. One is based on principle of just acquisition and second is principle of just transfer, right? But he said that if there is a wrong in the past, that can be rectified. So he said, that it's called principle of rectification. Now, his theory of justice, the Robert Nozick theory of justice was criticized by many. For example, communitarian criticized his theory of justice. Feminists criticized, his theory of justice. So, one or two or three criticism can be put, right? Or neo-Marxists criticize his theory of justice, right? So, one can offer criticism against his theory of justice. Fine. Now, let me talk about section B. So, we have finished section A. Now, we have to talk about section B. Now, look at the section B. Now, question 5. So, it has 5 sub questions like 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D and 5E, and it is compulsory to attempt, right? It is compulsory to attempt, no choice, mandatory one. Fine. Let me see, what are the questions and how you can attempt it. Now, analyze the workers' movement in India in pre-independent time. Now, why workers' movement in India? Because if you come to the, if you see the India, colonial India, British established many industries in city. For example, Bombay, Calcutta, right? These were the two industrial city, and workers' movement began because working condition was very bad, right? Working hour was very working hour was not fixed, wages were very low, their living condition was very bad, not good, right? And price rise, right? The price rise was very high. So, if you look at the workers' movement that began in the jute mill of Calcutta and the textile mill of Bombay, right? With the advent of First World War, right? If you can see, with the advent of First World War, actually industrialization took place at growth very extensively, right? It increased because you have to supply, you have to fulfill the supply chain. So, if you look at, people moved from village to city, right? But city was always scarce, right? It's scarce of housing, it's scarce of food, and even it's scarce of job, right? But so, if you look at the militant workers movement had started in Bombay, right? Under the revolutionary union, it's called Girni Kamgar Union, right? In 1919, All India Trade Union Committee was founded and it was headed by Lala Lajpat Rai, right? Working class fought for the better working condition, nothing else, better working condition, right? And against the wage cut, against the price rise, right? Against the working condition, against for the leave, right? So they, and the method of protest was strike. What was the method of protest? It was a strike. Now you can see there was a series of strike in Bombay, Solapur, Nagpur, Calcutta, Kanpur, Jamshedpur and other city, right? And when the Communist Party established in 1925, now Communist Party has taken the cause of workers movement in India, and there was a many leader like S.A. Dange, right? S.A. Dange, Dr. Bhupendra, B.V. Giri, right, has taken the leadership in different part of India. Now, if you look at the workers movement in pre-independent India, they resort to the violence. Strike, actually always a strike used to promote violence. And due to this violence, Gandhi did not like to the violent workers movement. Although Gandhi, played a very crucial role in Ahmedabad mill case, but he did not like workers movement in pre-independent India. Right? In response, workers did not like Gandhian, Quit India movement. And even when the India became independent, their subsection of the working class said it is ye azadi duty hai, right? So that was the entire movement of a working class in India in pre-independent time. Now come to preamble of the constitution reflects it as a social contract. What is social contract? Social contract when every people come and have a contract. Now you see the preamble, the first word, the preamble, we the people of India. We the people of India, right? We the people of India constitute India into sovereign, socialist, a secular, democratic and republic, right? And ensure justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, unity and integrity. Now if you can see preamble, we are resolving ourselves, right? We are, taking a promise to ourselves, let constitute India as a sovereign, socialist, democratic republic and ensure justice, right? Social, economic and political, liberty of thought, belief, right? Faith, worship, expression, right? Equality of status and opportunity, right? So you can see here preamble as of Indian Constitution reflect as a social contract that we ourselves gives to this constitution on 26 November 1949. So this resolution has taken by we the people of India, and that signifies the social contract, right? That signifies the social contract, right? And it was basically agreement among the people, let's declare India as a sovereign, socialist, democratic republic state, right? So it actually clarify what would be the nature of Indian state, what would be the objective of Indian state, what would be the significance of democratic India, right, or secular India, right, and socialist India, right, or republic India, so that one can attempt this question very easy. Now look at this question. Legislative Council is a house without any effective power. Now everyone knows that Legislative Council is an institution at the state level, right? Now if you look at the parliamentary democracy has been opted at the central level as well as state level. So one should introduce Legislative Council. Why? Because parliament, it fulfills the parliamentary democratic norms. And then one should talk about that not many states, only few states in India have bicameralism. This means they have Legislative Council. You talk about Article 1, like for example, Article 169, right? Article 170 about the Legislative Council, and then one can talk about that why every state has not Legislative Council, right? And if some states have Legislative Council, but they don't have effective power. What is effective power? They don't have power on money bill, right? They don't have power on money bill. They don't have power on financial bill, right? Financial bill, right? And even the state legislative assembly abolishes Legislative Council with a special majority and passed by the parliament with simple majority. So if you look at the Legislative Council, it has no effective power, right? There are argument against it that it burdens on a public exchequer money, public fund, right, and it delays on passing the bill, right. However, if you look at the Legislative Council, it strengthens the parliamentary democracy, right. So one can attempt like this. Now let me come to this question. This time, if you look at this question, there is a similar or comparable question was in the GS paper 2. How far is the National Commission for the Backward Classes an empowered body? Assess its role in the context of rising demand for backward among dominant communities. Now one should introduce National Commission for Backward Classes, right? For example, one should starts with Indira Shani versus Union of India case, right, in which Supreme Court argued that there should be a commission. So National Commission for Backward Classes started as a statutory body in 1993, right, and then one should explain its work, right, and its salience of its work compel the government to think about to change it from the constitution to a statutory to constitutional body. So 102nd amendment, Constitutional Amendment Act, transform the body from statutory to constitutional body. Now assess its role in the context of rising demand for backwardness among the dominant community. If you see the OBC, it constitutes 52% of population as per the Mandal Commission report, right. Now OBC is not a homogeneous community, it is a heterogeneous community, and if you look at within the OBC community, there are few class caste which has occupied the most of the proportion of the 27% reservation, right. There are many classes within the OBC which have no representation in government institution, and therefore one can cite the recently appointed commission, right, that subclassify the OBC, right, subclassify the OBC and recommend it which committee needs more protection within the OBC, and its job is also for National Commission for backward classes, which to examine which community within the OBC have remained deprived, right, and has not able to get fruits of reservation, right, in educational institution and jobs, right. So that one should do like this. Now come to here the next question. High concentration of economic activities and consumption pattern in post-liberalization period has led to failure of environmental movement in India. Elitist. Now if you look at since 1990, we have concentrated on opening of market, right, opening of market, right, that includes delicensing, right, and if you look at the economic activity, it had been diversified, right. So for example, if you see television or laptop or mobile, there are diversity, you can see the multiple MNCs, transnational companies entered in India, and they flooded the product in India, right, and that promoted consumption pattern. If you look at one people have many car, or one people have many mobile, and we have diversified, for example, kurkure or any pad, there are multiple product in packet, right, and there are industrialization, right, in the post 1990, right, which relaxed the norm for environment, right. So that resulted in environmental problem. If you look at the glacier, which is melting down, right, and we can see the drought, we can see the flood, we can see various problem due to the highest the diversified economic activity and high consumption pattern in 1990, and that posed a problem on environmental movement in India, right, that has posed, and if you look at, someone can cite how Jargon Habermas, right, talked about that, how mass culture, the mass consumerism, right, has posed threat to movement, because people are watching on Facebook, Twitter, writing Twitter, but not going on ground to protest, to show the solidarity, right. So that is one can give example. Now let me move to the next question, which is 6th A and 20 marker, of course 20 marks. Now here you can see electoral behavior of voters is governed by the social, more so by social and economic factors than the political factors. One should introduce what is electoral behavior. One should introduce electoral behavior, and then one should go through what are the factors of electoral behavior. What are the factors of electoral behavior? There are many factors. For example, there are social factors, right. What are the social factors of electoral behavior? Right, for example, caste, right, for example, religion, right, for example, region, right, for example, language, for example, ethnicity. These are the social factors of which shapes the voting choice of both of individual. Now if you look at the economic factor, what are the economic factors of for example B, we talk about economic factors. What are the economic factors, right? First ones, that will be class factor, right, the poverty, inequality, etc. Second, disparities, right, developmental disparities, if you can see that states like Bihar, which are more Bihar, UP and Orissa, which are not developed, but if you look at the other state, for example, southern state, Odisha, southern state means Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, which are more developed. If you go to the western side like Gujarat, Maharashtra, which are more developed. If you come to the northern part, like Haryana, Punjab is more developed, right? So this also shapes, when the political leaders assure development, right? For example, industrialization or giving of new jobs, through the setting of new industries or new services sectors. So this also, shapes electoral behavior, right? Electoral choice of the voter. Now, what is the political factor? Political factor could be ideology. Political factor could be ideology. So it does matter, right? For example, it does matter what is the political ideology of the political party, but it does not matter. Basically, social factor, right, and economic factor dominates, right, while a voter goes to the ballot box, Fine. So one need to analyze all these three factors and then conclude the answer, right, according to the question. So you one need to address it. Now let me talk about the next one. Now doctrine of basic structure of the Constitution has enhanced the power review of the Supreme Court examine. Now the one should start with the Keswad and Bharti, right? Keswad and Bharti case 1973, right, and define what is basic structure doctrine, right? And in the Keswad and Bharti case, what happened, the Supreme Court reached at the compromise between the Parliament and the court, right? That Parliament has unlimited power to amend any part of the Indian Constitution, including fundamental right and preamble, but they cannot damage the basic structure. Cannot damage the basic structure, right? And in that case, Supreme Court intervene and may nullify that amendment as a null and void. Now if you can cite many Supreme Court judgment that talks about what are the basic structure. For example, SR Bomai case, which establishes socialism, socialism, secularism, federalism, right, are the basic structure of the Constitution. Fine. Then free and fair election, then rule of law, right, Article 32, right, judicial review, right. So Supreme Court empowered itself, right, and one can cite Pratap Bhanu Mehta, that he said that Pratap Bhanu Mehta argued that Supreme Court is not has become an institution of governance, right, institution of governance, and of course it is a paradoxical institution, right. So Supreme Court has actually empowered itself to the review, right. One can example give the how Supreme Court invalidated 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, right, and Judicial National Commission, National Appointment Commission. बोल देना, मैं शुरू कर दूंगा. Function is, what is the function of interested council? To coordinate and cooperate among various states on common agenda. Recently, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Stalin, argued that there should be interstate council meeting thrice in a year, right? And Stalin advocated that every bill of national importance should be discussed in interstate council. Now, the second part is to what extent this body has been successfully achieving objective. Now, here there are lots of scope to criticize interstate council. Now, if you look at the the meeting, it has been said that there should be thrice meeting in a year of interstate council. But if you look at from 1990 to till now 2022, there had been only 11 or 12 times a meeting. Last time interstate council meeting was held in 2016, right? And if you see the interstate council meeting to achieve cooperation and coordination among the nation state, it has been minimal one, right? There has been many state and center conflict, right, on various issues. For example, even during COVID-19, you can see the difference of opinion between state and center because there was no sitting of interstate council meeting, right? So one can answer it. Now let me talk about next question. Here 7th A. Now, examine the unique feature of 73rd constitutional amendment. Do you think that this amendment would contribute in achieving the goal of empowerment of marginalized section of the society? There are two parts of the question, and first part, there are 20 marks, right? So 150 words you have to hear and 150 marks words you have to explain this. Now one need to start with the 73rd Amendment Act. 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, right, which provided a uniform structure of PRI, right, and the unique feature was it established a Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha is the first, right, institution of deliberation, right, and second was a uniform structure was established. So 3-tier structure was established in PRI throughout the state. Then periodic election was established, periodic election, right. So 5 years term has been fixed for PRI election, right. Fourth, you can see district planning committee. District planning committee was established. Fifth, there is a governor who is empowered to constitute election commission in order to conduct Panchayati Raj election. So there was an election commission. Then there was a finance commission. Here again, governor is empowered to constitute finance commission in order to do devolution of finance to the panchayat. Now, one separate list, for example, 11th schedule was inserted. 11th schedule was inserted and it consists 29 subjects, right? That power was given to the panchayat. Now come to the that do you think that this amendment would contribute in achieving the goal of empowerment of marginalized section of the society? Now, second part, you need to treat about, that, if you look at 73rd Amendment Act, it included Article 243, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, right? And the 33% reservation for women had been secured, right? Later on, 20 states out of 28 states given 50% reservation to women in the Panchayati Raj, right? And if you look to the performance of women, this is remarkable. However, women are facing lots of problems, like the problem of function, fund and functionaries, the problem of patriarchy, like, the dominance of their male counterpart, like son and husband. They are called, Pradhan Pati or Pradhan Putra, right? But at the same time, there are successful story, right? Kuldeep Nayyar has narrated this story, for example, Fatima B, right, or Tara, right, or Kamla in Rajasthan, Fatima B in Andhra Pradesh. They have, proved a remarkable success, right? Now, if you look at the SC/ST, Article 243D also ensures, a reservation of seats for SC/ST according to their population. Now, if you look at the many SC leaders, they have also, created a wonderful story. For example, Mogna village, right, where Sarpanch, right, Bhola had created a success story about Panchayati Raj. But at the same time, like, author like, George Matthew, right, talks about that, Panchayati Raj in the Indian villages, there is a perpetuation of caste discrimination and exclusion, right? So, yes, there is a mixed response, right? There are success, but at the same time, fight is going on. But at the same time, the Peter Ronald D'Souza and many authors, explained this local government, right, Panchayati Raj, as a silent revolution in India. So, you have to balance the answer. Now, let me talk about the next question. Question is, a speaker represents the freedom and dignity of the house. Everyone knows a speaker, right? So, first one should introduce with the speaker. Speaker of the house and power, right? Power of the speaker. And it has many power of the speaker. For example, a speaker is a highest authority within the Lok Sabha, right? It decides, it dissolve the house. It can summon the house to meet. It has power to suspend the member of the house. It has power to implement rules and regulation. It has power to decide particular bill is money bill or not, right? And he is the final interpreter of any law, or any statute within the parliament, right? He appoints head of the any parliamentary committee, right? He can ask for a special session of the parliament, a speaker. So there are lots of power of the speaker, right? And he is a final authority, in parliamentary democracy, right? And at the same time, there are some problem with speaker, right? If you look at the UK democracy, where the speaker is, a non-partisan, right? When a person assumes the office of the speaker, right, he actually resigns from the party so that he can be impartial. But in Indian democracy, the speaker does not resign from the party, he carry party membership, at the same time he remains a speaker, right? And so there are a allegation against the speaker that a speaker often become biased towards their party, right? So, right, at the same time, a speaker representing the freedom and dignity of the house, of course. Now let me talk about the next question. Discuss the policy initiatives of the 14th Finance Commission aimed towards promoting and strengthening agricultural development in India. Now one can start with the Finance Commission, right, and the role of Finance Commission in Indian development, right, and the 14th Finance Commission recommendation, right. For example, it talked about to increase the share of fund from 34 to 42%, right, and then once at the start, what are the criteria Finance Commission has put up for the resources distribution, right. For example, territory, population, right, responsibility, and then one can talk about that how 14th Finance Commission talked about strengthening the local government, right, and then and it promoted agricultural development in India, right. It has given many recommendations, right, in order to promote agricultural development in India through the local government, right. And it talked about share of fund, it talked about strengthening local government, it talked about strengthening local the development, agricultural development, right. It talked about empower the agricultural sector, fine. So one can attempt this way. Now let me talk about the 8th question. This is the last question, right. So here, ethnicity is the underlying cause which poses a great challenge in the resolution of problem in northeastern region of India. Comment. Now if you look at India is a multicultural state, right, where we have multi-ethnic group, especially the northeastern region has diversity of many ethnicity. And if you look at ethnicity, it refers to a self-conscious and distinct group, right, which claims a different kind of culture, different kind of tradition, customs, and in this way that you can define. And India is a not a multi-ethnic society. Northeastern state has multi largest ethnic group based on language, based on tribe, right, and there is a various kinds of ethnic conflict in northeast, right, that reappear time to time, right. Now if you look at the major cause of in the northeastern, then cause is interstate migration, right. You remember ILP, inner line permit, right. So it has been acquired by Manipur in 2019. Earlier ILP status was given to only 3, it was only for the 3 countries, right, but in Manipur now other states also demanding ILP. So interstate migration, development, then territorial disputes, for example between Meghalaya and Assam, right. So these are the major problem of and what is the major challenges of the northeastern state, right. And ASPA, for example, ASPA is also one of the problem, right, of right. Now if you look at the other problem, after interstate migration, then developmental disparity, which is also a problem in northeastern state, right, and territorial dispute between different states, right. So one can cite here Harop, Marin Warner, right, many authors, and one can attempt the question. Now come to here this question 8b. The making of Indian Constitution described as an attempt towards social revolution. Basically, this is Granville Austin's statement, right? And how he talked about that Indian society, which is a feudal one, right, which is an unequal society where we have ensured fundamental right, right, which have ensured fundamental right and DPSP, right, which strives to make India a egalitarian society. Right. So, Granville Austin talks about that fundamental right and DPSP both constitute as a conscience of the Constitution, right, and it strives to make the society egalitarian, right, a society which is a feudal, which is a most unequal, but making of Indian Constitution was of course promoted social revolution. For example, Article 17. Right. For example, Article 15.3, Article 15.4, Article 15.5, right. For example, Article 16.4, right. Article 13 Clause 1, which says all law which was existed in the pre-independent era, if that law is contravention to the fundamental right described in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, shall be null and void. Any law which is inconsistent with the fundamental right described in Part 3, right, shall be null and void. So, if you look at the the making of Indian Constitution, right, it was really an attempt of social revolution. To look at the preamble, right, liberty, equality, fraternity, right, dignity, it talks about, right, the many provision of DPSP, for example, minimizing the inequality, right, using the common resources in the best possible way, giving equal pay for the equal work to women, free legal aid, right. So, you can see here that the making of Indian Constitution was really an attempt of the social revolution in India. Now, the last question I would talk about here, how far it is correct that regional party have strengthened democracy and federal system, right? Substantiate your answer with suitable example. Now, one should start with here with democracy at the eve of in the first 3 decades. Democracy at in the first 3 decades. Right, where there was a one party dominance. One party dominance, what Rajini Kothari talked about, one party dominance, right. But if you look at 1967, when the first time this dominance was challenged by few regional party, but finally in 1990, if you look at the rise of regional party in various states, like the SP and BSP in Uttar Pradesh, Anti Rama Rao's party, Telugu Desam party, Assam Gan Parishad in Assam, right, and DMK, IDMK was in the Tamil Nadu, then BJD was in Odisha. This actually political party, regional parties, represented the regional interest of Indian democracy, right. So, the democracy has been diversified through the regional representation, right. Now, if you look at through the advent of regional party, right, there was no one party which was able to come on center on its own, except BJP, which came in 2014, So, since 1984, after 30 years, the regional party, had its own voice at the center, right? And in this way, they negotiated better with the center, right? and the federal system has become more flexible, right? But at the same time, in 2014, when the BJP came to the power as a national party, again you can see the strain in federal system, right, and Indian democracy. But if you look at the rise of regional party and strengthening of the regional party, all of course strengthen the Indian democracy and federal system, right? So you can substantiate the example, for example, DMK and AIDMK in Tamil Nadu, right? So if you look at the party in power at the center have alliance with a party which is also power in the Tamil Nadu. Now since 1990, Tamil Nadu had received better resource than the other state due to the regional negotiation, right? If you look at the parties in UP and parties in Bihar, right, they have the share in the center. If you look at the parties in other states, they have share at the center, and they negotiated with the better with the party who is ruling at the center. So actually, regional party have strengthened the democracy and federal system in India, right? And it is true for the all regional party who is able to negotiate better, right, with the party ruling at the center, right? So that is the last question. I hope you have your ideas clear. If there is any issue, you can make comment. I'll reply to you. Thank you so much.